Welcome back to Peaceful Soul. Have you ever wondered why there are days when everything in your life seems fine? Nothing major is going wrong, and yet you still feel bored, empty, and unable to find joy? If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. Research from the National Institute of Mental Health shows that more than 21 million American adults experience at least one major depressive episode every year. And here's the surprising part. Many of them admit they can't point to a specific cause. Their lives may look complete from the outside, but their sense of happiness slowly slips away. Have you ever seen yourself in that situation? If you have, share it in the comments, because your story might help someone else feel less alone on their journey. I'm a doctor who has spent many years studying mental health, and in this video, I want to explore a fresh perspective with you. We won't just focus on the big causes like trauma or major life events. Instead, we'll take a closer look at the small everyday habits that often go unnoticed. Things that might seem harmless at first, but when they pile up over time, they become the building blocks of depression. The good news is that if you can recognize and change these habits, your brain has an incredible ability to heal and rebuild itself. That's why I encourage you to stick with me until the end of this video. Because I truly believe you'll discover at least one thing that makes you want to start changing today. One of the most fascinating mechanisms scientists have discovered is something called the brain's quit circuit. Simply put, the brain can shift from thinking, "I'll try one more time," to, "This is pointless. I give up." When negative experiences keep stacking up, the nervous system starts to reinforce feelings of helplessness and despair. Have you ever wondered why it sometimes feels easier to give up quickly instead of pushing through just a little longer? This is one of the scientific explanations. And the encouraging part is, if we intervene in those small daily factors, we can gradually loosen the grip of that quit circuit. Let's start with a familiar habit, dismissing the positives. Do you remember the last time someone complimented you? Maybe a coworker told you that you did a great job, or a friend said you looked amazing in your new outfit. What was your reaction? If you often think, "They're just being polite," or brush it off as nothing important, you're actually training your brain to ignore positive signals. I once spoke with a patient named Emily. She had just gotten a promotion. But instead of celebrating, she told me it didn't matter because inflation would eat up the extra pay. That wasn't just pessimism, it was a defense mechanism. Emily's brain had learned to avoid joy as a way to shield herself from disappointment. But that also meant she no longer felt genuine happiness. This lines up with research from the University of California, where psychologists found that people who tend to downplay or dismiss their own successes are more likely to experience higher levels of depression. So next time someone gives you a compliment, try pausing for a moment and smiling. Don't rush to push it away. Let your brain soak in that positive feeling, because it's exactly these small moments that lay the foundation for mental strength. Have you ever caught yourself dismissing compliments like Emily? Share your experience. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to you. Another small but common habit is harsh self-blame when you make mistakes. Have you ever said things to yourself like, "I'm so stupid," or "I can never do anything right"? Many people believe that being hard on themselves will motivate them to improve. But science shows the opposite. Research at Carnegie Mellon University found that people who frequently self-criticize are not only more prone to depression, but also have weaker immune systems. So every time you berate yourself, your body suffers not just mentally, but physically as well. Let me ask you this. If that approach really worked, wouldn't you already be out of that cycle by now? Maybe it's time to try something different, like self-compassion. Self-compassion doesn't mean making excuses or ignoring mistakes. It means recognizing that mistakes are a normal part of being human. Another patient of mine, Michael, used to be extremely harsh with himself. He believed that unless he was perfect, he had no value. But once he started practicing self-talk like, "Everyone makes mistakes. I have the right to try again," he began to feel lighter, and his productivity actually improved. This proves that self-compassion doesn't make you weak, it's a source of strength that helps you move forward. Do you think it might be time to change the way you talk to yourself? When we talk about depression, there's a vicious cycle many people don't realize. It's the way we react to our own emotions. Instead of just feeling sad, anxious, or guilty, we judge ourselves for having those emotions in the first place. Have you ever caught yourself saying things like, "I'm so weak for being anxious," or "I'm useless for feeling sad"? Those thoughts are like pouring concrete over emotions that are already heavy and uncomfortable. Research from Stanford University shows that self-judgment about feelings actually doubles the risk of developing mood disorders. So if you've ever blamed yourself for your emotions, you're not alone, and the good news is, you can change this. I remember a woman named Sarah. She came to my clinic completely worn down after struggling with anxiety for a long time. When I asked how she felt, she said the worst part wasn't the anxiety itself, it was the shame of being anxious. She believed that as an adult, she shouldn't feel that way. But as we worked together on accepting anxiety as a natural response of the body, she began to feel lighter. Sometimes, healing doesn't start with removing negative emotions, but with allowing them to exist without judgment. Have you ever felt ashamed of your own emotions? Share in the comments. Your story might help someone else realize they're not abnormal. Another common consequence of depression is withdrawing from social life. At first, you might cancel a hangout because you're tired, but gradually, you start avoiding more and more, telling yourself your friends don't really want to see you, or that you'll just let everyone down. Your brain whispers that avoidance will keep you safe from being hurt. The irony is that avoidance feeds loneliness and deepens depression. In a 10-year study at Harvard, researchers found that social connection was the single strongest predictor of happiness, even more than income or fame. Do you think it might be time to call an old friend again? I once worked with a young man named Daniel. Back in college, he was the life of the party. But after a depressive episode, he started turning down every invitation. At first, his friends were patient, but eventually, they stopped reaching out. Daniel took that as proof he wasn't valuable, but really, it was just the natural outcome of withdrawal. When he finally tried a small step, sending a simple, "hello" text to an old friend, he was surprised by the warm response. That gave him the strength to keep reconnecting. Could you try the same today? Just one small message. See what happens. Another habit worth mentioning is emotional numbing. Many of us were taught from childhood that negative emotions should be hidden or dismissed. Maybe your parents said things like, "Stop crying, it's nothing." Over time, we learn to suppress. As adults, that often turns into reaching for food, phones, work, anything to avoid feeling what we really feel. But avoidance doesn't erase emotions, it just buries them in the dark corners of the mind, where they quietly build up. Research from the Mayo Clinic shows that people who habitually suppress emotions face higher risks of heart disease and immune disorders. Allowing yourself to experience feelings, instead of shoving them down, is a vital step toward healing. One of my patients, John, once described it as carrying an invisible backpack full of bricks. Every time he suppressed an emotion, another brick went in. At first, he didn't notice, but eventually, the backpack grew so heavy that it drained all his energy. As we worked together, he learned to journal his emotions and share them with a close friend. Little by little, that imaginary backpack became lighter. Are you carrying an invisible backpack like John? If so, how might you start taking bricks out today? When we don't process emotions, another trap we fall into is rumination, or overthinking. That's when you keep replaying painful memories, past mistakes, or what if scenarios on a loop. The brain thinks it's problem solving, but really, it's keeping you stuck. Research from the University of Michigan shows that people who ruminate a lot are 3 times more likely to experience depression than others. The key isn't to stop thinking altogether, but to redirect it toward real action. Have you ever stayed up all night replaying something you said wrong in a conversation, only to realize the next day that nobody else even remembered it but you? A fascinating example comes from Tim Ferriss, the well-known author and entrepreneur. He's shared that his depression often stems from a negative cycle of poor sleep and too much caffeine. When he couldn't sleep, he drank more coffee. The more coffee he drank, the harder it was to sleep. After a few days, feelings of hopelessness crept in. This shows that sometimes the problem isn't the emotions themselves, but the basic habits around sleep, diet, and stress. Research from the CDC confirms that chronic sleep deprivation significantly raises the risk of mood disorders. Are you underestimating the role of sleep in your mental health? In my work, I also met an doctor named Lisa. She told me many patients came in with panic attacks, convinced they were having a heart attack. When asked about stress, they insisted they weren't stressed at all. But as Lisa dug deeper, it became clear they were carrying overwhelming loads: school, jobs, family, finances. They had suppressed stress for so long they no longer recognized it. It's like swimming in icy water long enough that your body goes numb. You stop feeling cold. But the damage continues. That's why recognizing and caring for basic needs like sleep, food, and movement isn't just self-care, it's powerful depression prevention. So let me ask you, have you been sleeping enough this week? One of the most common mental traps that feeds depression is the victim mindset. This is when you believe that everything in life is beyond your control. That you're simply the one stuck taking the blows. You might tell yourself, I never get the same chances as other people. Or, life is always against me. The sad part is, those thoughts blind you to the small pieces of life you actually can change. Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that people who develop learned helplessness are far more likely to experience depression compared to others. Have you ever found yourself in that place, feeling powerless, as if nothing you do will make a difference? I once worked with a client named Emily. She often complained about her job, her boss, her coworkers, and even her family. Every time I asked what she wanted to change, Emily would say, nothing can be changed. But during one session, I encouraged her to find just one small thing within her control, something like taking a 10-minute walk after work. That tiny shift gave her a surprising sense of relief. As her mood improved, she had more energy to tackle bigger issues. It was proof that even a small sense of control can open the door out of the cycle. What's one small change you think you could start with today? Closely related to this is the idea of a fixed mindset, the belief that your abilities and self-worth are set in stone and can't improve. People with this mindset often think, this is just who I am. Nothing will change. On the other hand, a growth mindset allows us to believe that skills and habits can be developed over time. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck has shown that simply shifting from a fixed to a growth mindset can significantly lower the risk of depression, because suddenly you start to see a future with possibilities. If you've ever told yourself, I'm just not good at communicating, you'll probably give up easily. But if you say, I'm not good at it yet, but I can learn, you give yourself an escape hatch. So how do you see yourself right now, fixed or growing? A very real example comes from Mark, a young programmer. He constantly compared himself to coworkers and thought, I'm just not smart enough. That belief led him to procrastinate, avoid challenges, and, ironically, reinforce the negative story he told himself. But after joining a workshop on growth mindset, Mark started practicing a new way of talking to himself. I don't know how to do this yet, but I can learn step by step. Within a few months, not only had his skills improved, but his mental outlook transformed as well. Sometimes the biggest medicine is simply changing the way you speak to yourself. Have you ever tried that shift in self-talk? If not, why not start today? Another factor that silently worsens depression is inaction. The more down you feel, the less you want to do. And the less you do, the worse you feel. Psychologists call this the inaction spiral. Our brains link activity with reward. When you do something, even something small, your brain releases dopamine, lifting your mood. But when you stay still, avoid, and procrastinate, the brain loses those chances for encouragement. A well-known study from Cambridge University found that just 30 minutes of light physical activity a day can reduce the risk of depression by up to 30%. Do you think you could start with just 5 minutes of walking around your block each day? I remember a professor who struggled with severe depression. He once told me that every morning, getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. Instead of forcing himself to climb the mountain, he set a tiny goal: just put his feet on the floor. Once that was done, the next goal was to walk out of the room. Slowly, step by step, he regained his rhythm and his work. His story is a reminder that sometimes the key isn't doing a lot, it's simply starting with the smallest action. What's the tiniest step you could take today to break free from stillness? Beyond action, another important habit is how we face failure. Depression often magnifies small failures into proof that you're worthless. But in reality, failure is simply data. It tells you what didn't work. Thomas Edison famously said he didn't fail 10,000 times, he just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. Research from the University of Toronto shows that people who view failure as a learning opportunity bounce back mentally much faster than those who see it as evidence of inadequacy. Could you reframe your most recent failure as a lesson, rather than a dead end? I once spoke with a student named Anna. She failed an important exam and immediately concluded, "I'm too stupid. I'll never succeed." That thought pushed her into months of depression. But as we analyzed the situation, Anna realized that failing a test didn't define her entire life. It only showed that she needed a different study method, or better time management. Once she experimented with new strategies, her results improved dramatically. Her story shows that failure is not a definition, it's just feedback. Are you letting a small failure from your past define your whole identity? One last point I want to share here is the power of gratitude. It may sound simple, but research from the University of California has shown that writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day for 21 days can significantly reduce depressive symptoms. When you train your brain to focus on positives, it builds a habit of scanning for joy instead of only seeing darkness. One of my patients started a gratitude journal by writing down tiny things. Like, "I'm grateful for having a hot cup of tea today." Over time, he realized his world wasn't as bleak as he once thought. Would you be willing to challenge yourself tonight by writing down 3 things you're grateful for? When it comes to breaking free from the spiral of depression, one of the most important first steps is learning how to actively take care of yourself. It may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people I meet forget about themselves in their daily routines. They put work, family, and social responsibilities first, and in the end, they burn out. But the body and mind can't keep running without care. Research from the Mayo Clinic shows that people who dedicate at least 20 minutes a day to self-care activities, even something as simple as walking, meditating, or reading, have significantly lower rates of anxiety and depression. So let me ask you, do you set aside even a small pocket of time each day just to recharge your own batteries? I remember a patient named Laura, a busy mother of 3. Every day was a never-ending cycle, dropping kids off at school, making dinner, working late at the office. Laura often told me she had no time for herself. But when we broke it down together, I asked her, "If you collapse, who's going to take care of your 3 kids?" That question stopped her in her tracks. She started a small habit. Every night after the kids went to bed, she spent 15 minutes reading a book she loved. Just that simple act made her feel calmer and helped her sleep better. Self-care isn't selfish, it's the foundation that allows you to keep loving others. Would you agree that you deserve the same care and attention you give to everyone else? Another proven method that helps people recover emotionally is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This is a scientific approach that helps us recognize and change negative thought patterns. Have you ever caught yourself stuck in loops like, "I'll never get it right," or "I always fail"? CBT teaches you to pause and ask, is it really true that I always fail? Is there evidence to the contrary? That gentle challenge gives your brain the chance to create new thought pathways. Multiple studies, including reports from the National Institutes of Health, confirm that CBT is one of the most effective treatments for depression. Would you be willing to try writing down one negative thought you've had recently and then questioning it? One story I often share is about John, a software engineer who struggled with severe depression. He constantly believed he was a burden to his family. During CBT sessions, he was encouraged to list the evidence supporting and challenging that thought. He realized his wife still trusted him, his kids still came to him for advice, and his coworkers still valued his skills. Looking at that list, John began to see that the belief, "I'm a burden," wasn't entirely true. Over time, he learned to build more balanced thoughts. His story shows us that changing the way we think isn't wishful, it's absolutely possible. Have you ever tried writing out the evidence for and against one of your own negative beliefs? Alongside CBT, another approach gaining attention is mindfulness. You've probably heard about it through meditation classes or apps. But mindfulness isn't just sitting still with your eyes closed, it's the practice of being fully present in the moment. Observing your thoughts and emotions without judgment. A Harvard study found that people who practiced mindfulness for at least 10 minutes a day showed positive changes in brain areas related to emotions and focus. Think about it. How often do you find yourself living in the past or worrying about the future, instead of truly being here, now? A powerful example is Sarah, a marketing employee constantly stressed by deadlines. She decided to try a simple mindfulness exercise each morning. While drinking her coffee, instead of checking emails, she focused completely on the taste, the warmth of the cup, and her breathing. For those few minutes, she let her mind rest. After several weeks, Sarah noticed she was less reactive, more emotionally steady, and even more creative at work. Sometimes, small changes in how we show up can create huge ripple effects. Could you try starting with something simple, like paying full attention to one everyday activity such as eating or walking? Community is another crucial factor in recovery. Isolation and loneliness are fertile ground for depression. A study from Brigham Young University found that social isolation can be as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. On the flip side, having even one close relationship can dramatically reduce the risk of depression. When was the last time you picked up the phone just to check in on a friend? One case that really stuck with me is Michael, a veteran. After leaving the military, he went through a period of deep isolation, rarely interacting with anyone. Depression kept him almost entirely at home. But when he was encouraged to join a community support group for veterans, he gradually opened up. He found understanding, connection, and empathy among others with similar experiences. Within months, Michael was the one welcoming and helping newcomers, and in doing so, he rediscovered his sense of purpose. His story is proof that social connection not only helps you receive, but also gives you the chance to give back. Would you be open to starting just one small conversation with someone today? Finally, I want to highlight the role of professional therapy and medication when necessary. Depression is a medical condition, it's not simply a weakness of will. Just as you'd need antibiotics for pneumonia, when depression is severe, medication combined with therapy can be essential. Many people hesitate to seek help out of fear of being judged. But did you know that in the US, according to the NIMH, over 60% of patients with depression show significant recovery when they combine psychotherapy with medication, compared to only about 30% when they try to manage it alone? Reaching out for help doesn't make you weak, it proves you're brave enough to heal. Would you be willing to see seeking professional help as a sign of strength rather than weakness? When we talk about depression, most people immediately think of psychology, but very few realize that daily lifestyle has a direct impact on the brain and emotions. What you eat, how much you sleep, your level of physical activity, all of these create either balance or imbalance in the nervous system. I once read a study from Cambridge University showing that people who maintain a healthy lifestyle are up to 57% less likely to develop depression. That's not a small number. So if just a few lifestyle changes could cut your risk of depression in half, why wouldn't we at least try? Let's start with sleep, the foundation that so often gets overlooked. Have you noticed how just one sleepless night can shift your entire mood? The brain relies on sleep to regulate neurotransmitters, especially serotonin and dopamine, the two chemicals most directly linked to happiness. A study from UC Berkeley found that lack of sleep increases activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that controls fear and stress. That's why after a sleepless night you're more anxious, more irritable. So here's the question. Do you sacrifice sleep to prioritize work? Or do you protect your sleep as a key part of your mental health? I remember David, a young lawyer I once met. He regularly worked until 2 or 3 in the morning, convinced that coffee could make up for it. But the more he pushed, the more exhausted and unmotivated he felt, until eventually depression crept in. It wasn't until he adjusted his schedule and committed to at least 7 hours of sleep a night that things began to change. Within weeks, he noticed sharper focus, a more stable mood, and a renewed sense of energy for life. David's story reminds us that sleep isn't a luxury, it's a natural medicine for the mind. Would you be willing to change your sleep habits, even just for 1 week, to see the difference? Next is nutrition. Did you know that sugar and processed foods can affect your mental health? Scientists often call the gut the second brain, because over 90% of serotonin is produced there. A study in the journal Nutritional Neuroscience found that people who ate more leafy greens, omega-3 rich fish, and whole grains had significantly lower rates of depression. On the other hand, Diets heavy in sugar and fried foods were linked to a higher risk. So the next time you're choosing between a greasy burger and a salmon salad, which one will you pick for your brain? Another patient of mine, Emily, struggled with postpartum depression. During therapy, she admitted she ate fast food almost daily because she had no time to cook. We didn't ask her to overhaul everything overnight. Instead, we encouraged her to add just one healthy meal a day. Emily chose oatmeal with berries and walnuts for breakfast. Slowly, her energy improved and her mood stabilized. Nutrition isn't an instant cure, but when you stick with it, the changes can be profound. So what do you think, if you swapped just one meal a day for something healthier? Would you give it a try? Physical activity is another factor we often ignore. Have you ever heard the phrase, exercise is medicine? It's absolutely true. When you move your body, it produces endorphins, your natural mood boosters. Harvard research shows that brisk walking for just 30 minutes, 3 times a week, can reduce depression symptoms as effectively as antidepressants in some mild to moderate cases. That means you don't have to be an athlete, you can start small. Could you carve out just 10 minutes after dinner to walk instead of collapsing on the couch? Mark, an office worker, is living proof. He battled depression for years and had nearly given up on outdoor activities. But with a gentle nudge, he started walking around his neighborhood each morning. At first, he felt reluctant and noticed little difference. But after a few weeks, his mood lifted. He found himself greeting neighbors, and the loneliness began to fade. Walking not only improved his mental health but also opened doors to social connection. Don't you think it's amazing how small steps can lead to big life changes? Beyond sleep, nutrition, and exercise, there's one more factor that rarely gets mentioned but is incredibly important: natural light. Our brains are designed to respond to the rhythms of day and night. Spending too much time indoors, with little exposure to sunlight, disrupts the production of melatonin and serotonin. A Swedish study found that light therapy, especially during winter, significantly reduced symptoms of depression in people with seasonal affective disorder. So here's a simple idea. Could you step outside for at least 15 minutes every morning? Breathe in fresh air, and let the sunlight do its work? When people talk about depression, many often think of it as a matter of willpower or negative thinking. But neuroscience shows it's actually a real change in the brain's structure and activity. Researchers have identified what they call the quit circuit, a chain of neural signals that shifts you from effort to surrender. At first, your brain tells you, keep going. This is tough, but you can get through it. But over time, as stress and disappointment build up, that circuit shifts to, it's useless. Just give up. This isn't weakness. It's your brain's automatic response to overload. Have you ever felt like you didn't consciously choose to give up, but your brain made that decision for you? A study at Yale University found that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and decision-making, shows reduced activity during prolonged depression. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the center for fear and negative emotions, becomes overactive. This explains why people with depression often get stuck in cycles of anxiety, pessimism, and indecision. The good news is that the brain can rewire itself through neuroplasticity, its ability to form new connections. In other words, you can retrain your brain, almost like building new neural highways. Do you believe your brain can learn to respond differently, even after years of depression? Take the story of James, a former athlete who fell into depression after a severe injury left him without a sense of purpose. Instead of giving up, he tried a technique called behavioral activation, which means acting first and letting the feelings follow. Every day, James forced himself to walk for just 10 minutes, even when he didn't want to. Slowly, his brain began to link this small action with a sense of accomplishment, releasing dopamine along the way. After a few months, he was back at the gym, rediscovering joy, and proving that even when the quit circuit is triggered, you can still rebuild the keep going circuit. Have you ever experienced times when taking action first led to positive feelings afterward? Meditation and deep breathing have also been proven to change the brain's structure. A famous Harvard study showed that people who practiced meditation regularly for 8 weeks had a thicker hippocampus, the region linked to memory and learning, and a smaller amygdala. In other words, Meditation makes the brain less reactive to stress and better at regulating emotions. Many people think meditation is too difficult or not for them. But sometimes just 5 minutes of sitting still, focusing on your breath, is enough to start retraining the brain. Would you be willing to challenge yourself to spend 5 minutes a day simply breathing and observing your body? Another powerful tool is the ability to reframe. When you face failure, your brain often defaults to negative thoughts, but you can train it to interpret things differently. For example, instead of thinking, "I failed, I'm useless," you can shift to, "I didn't succeed this time, but what can I learn from it?" This isn't lying to yourself, it's teaching your brain to see from another perspective. Scientists call this cognitive reframing. People who practice it regularly show stronger activity in brain regions linked to emotional flexibility. So, are you willing to write down a recent setback and try to reframe it in a more positive light? I also want to highlight another powerful tool, positive memory recall. People with depression tend to dwell on sad memories while their positive memories become blurred. But research shows that actively recalling joyful moments can trigger dopamine and serotonin in the brain. One of my patients, Anna, was encouraged to keep a 3 good things journal. At first, she thought it was silly. But after a few weeks, she noticed her brain was learning to focus on small but meaningful positives. A hug from her child, a compliment from a coworker, or simply a beautiful sunny morning. Would you like to try starting a journal like that? Writing down 3 good things each day, to see how it reshapes your brain? Finally, it's important to understand that retraining the brain doesn't happen overnight. It's like working out. You can't expect muscles to grow in just 1 week. But with consistent small actions, the brain gradually carves out new pathways, pulling you out of the negative cycle. It could be as simple as keeping a regular sleep routine, taking a short walk, practicing meditation, or rewriting one negative thought. Over time, these habits don't just change how you feel, they physically reshape your brain. So, the real question is, what small action will you choose today to begin retraining your brain? As we come to the end of today's journey, I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, which part of this message spoke to you the most? Was it James's story of finding hope again through small steps? Or Anna's healing through her 3 good things journal? Or maybe it was the moment you realized that your brain isn't your enemy, but a system that can be retrained, rewired, and taught to recover. Wherever you are in your battle with depression, remember this. Even one small action each day can open up a brand new path. You are not alone. There are millions of people out there experiencing the same emotions you're going through. And the most important thing to remember is this: you deserve healing. You deserve love, and you deserve a meaningful life. I want you to believe that even when the darkness feels overwhelming, there's always a light waiting for you to find it. The question is, are you willing to take one small step today to move closer to that light? If you found today's video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button so I know this is a topic you care about. Share your thoughts in the comments below, maybe a small habit that's helping you take care of your mental health, because your story might just inspire someone else who really needs it. And if you'd like to continue this journey of healing and exploring the science of mental well-being, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the next video. And you'll also be giving me the motivation to keep bringing you more science-backed insights and inspiring stories. Remember, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to begin. And I truly believe you can. Thank you for spending your precious time with me in this video. I can't wait to see you in the next one, where together we'll keep uncovering the secrets of the mind and body, so we can all live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives.